Lisa Martinez sat in the cold metal chair and watched the alien leaders argue. The meeting room on the Coalition flagship was huge, with beings from dozens of different worlds. Some looked like tall crystals that glowed blue. Others were floating, clouds of light. A few had too many arms and eyes that changed color when they talked. Lisa was the only human in the room. She had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Coalition for 5 years now. Most days, the aliens barely noticed her. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only joined the Coalition 200 years ago. To aliens who lived for thousands of years, humans were still children. The crystal being named Admiral Kethfar stood up. His voice sounded like wind chimes when he spoke. The Devourer swarm has returned from dark space. They have already destroyed 7 star systems in the outer rim. We must try to talk to them. Lisa felt her stomach drop. She had read about the swarm in the old files. They were machines that ate entire worlds. They turned planets into metal and energy to make more of themselves. The last time they came, 1,000 years ago, they had destroyed half the galaxy. Before disappearing, a floating cloud of purple light spoke next. All life can be reasoned with. We must send our best diplomatic ships. We will broadcast messages of peace in every known language. Lisa raised her hand. May I speak? The room went quiet. Admiral Kethfar's glow dimmed. Human Martinez, this is a discussion for experienced species. Your people have never faced a threat like this. But we have studied war, Lisa said. Our military historian Dr. Alan Cooper has research that might help. A being with 6 arms and golden skin laughed. The sound was like bells ringing. War? We evolved past such primitive thinking millions of years ago. Violence solves nothing. Lisa wanted to argue, but she knew it was pointless. These aliens had lived in peace for so long that they forgot some enemies could not be talked to. She sat back down and stayed quiet. Dr. Alan Cooper sat in the observer section behind Lisa. He was not allowed to speak unless the council asked him to. Alan had spent 30 years studying human military history. He knew about every war Earth had ever fought. He also knew that sometimes talking was not enough. Alan watched the aliens plan their peaceful response to the swarm. They would send 3 of their best ships. Each ship carried diplomats who spoke hundreds of languages. They had quantum computers that could translate any form of communication. They even had telepaths who could speak mind to mind. The plan was simple. The ships would approach the swarm and broadcast messages of friendship. They would offer to share technology and knowledge. They would try to understand what the swarm wanted and find a way to give it to them without violence. Lisa looked back at Alan. His face was grim. She could see he wanted to say something, but the rules were clear. Only council members could speak during emergency sessions. The vote was unanimous. Every alien species agreed to try diplomacy first. Lisa was the only one who did not vote. As Earth's ambassador, she could only advise. She could not make decisions for the Coalition. 3 days later, Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of his ship. The human vessel Independence was small compared to the Coalition diplomatic ships. It was supposed to stay far away and just observe. Humans were not trusted with important missions. Jake had been in space for 15 years. He commanded a crew of 20 humans. His weapons officer, Nina Rodriguez, sat at her station, watching the screens. His engineer, Pete Walsh, monitored the ship's systems. They were all good people who had joined the Coalition fleet to help keep peace in the galaxy. The 3 Coalition ships moved toward the swarm. They were beautiful vessels, designed for comfort and communication rather than fighting. Each ship carried 1,000 diplomats, scientists, and peace negotiators. The swarm appeared on the screens as a dark cloud in space. It was made up of millions of small machines, each one the size of a building. They moved together like a school of fish, flowing around the empty husks of dead planets. The coalition ships began broadcasting. Messages of peace went out in 40,000 different languages. Mathematical formulas showed friendly intent. Music from hundreds of worlds played across all frequencies. The ships even sent pictures of families and children from every coalition. Species. The swarm's response was swift. Black ships came out of the mechanical cloud. They were not built for beauty or comfort. They looked like weapons given form, all sharp edges and dark metal. They moved faster than anything the coalition had ever seen. Jake watched in horror as the swarm ships tore through the diplomatic vessels. The coalition ships had no weapons and weak shields. They were destroyed in minutes. 1 million souls died before they could even scream. "Captain," Enya said, her voice shaking, "should we help them?" Jake wanted to order an attack, but his ship had only basic weapons. The Independence was an escort vessel, not a warship. They would die as quickly as the diplomats had. "No," Jake said quietly. "Record everything. Someone needs to tell the galaxy what we saw." Pete Walsh threw up at his station. Nina started crying. Even Jake, who had seen combat before joining the coalition, felt sick. The swarm ships did not just destroy the coalition vessels. They pulled them apart piece by piece, studying every component before adding it to their own mascot. The mechanical cloud grew larger as it consumed the wreckage. The swarm had learned something from the peaceful ships. They were stronger now. Jake sent an emergency message back to coalition headquarters. Diplomacy failed. The swarm is not interested in talking. They only want to consume. We need a new plan. But Jake knew the coalition leaders would not listen. They would try diplomacy. Again, they would send more ships and more messages of peace. They would keep trying to talk while the galaxy burned around them. 3 more star systems went dark that week. Billions of lives were snuffed out as the swarm consumed world after world. Each victory made them stronger and smarter. Lisa sat in her quarters on the coalition flagship and read the reports. The swarm was moving toward the core worlds now. They were heading for the heart of galactic civilization. And the coalition's response was to build bigger broadcasting stations to send louder messages of peace. She opened a secure communication channel to Earth. It was time to tell her government the truth. The galaxy was going to die unless someone was willing to fight. President Helen Carter sat in the secure bunker deep under Washington. The reports from space made her stomach hurt. The coalition had lost 17 star systems in 2 weeks. Each system held billions of people. Now they were all gone, turned into raw materials for the swarm. Helen looked at the man across from her. Director Sam Hayes ran Earth's defense forces. Most people thought the defense forces were just a small group that protected human colonies. They had no idea how wrong they were. "Show me the real numbers, Sam," Helen said. Sam opened a folder marked with warnings in red letters. "We have 10,000 warships hidden across the galaxy. The coalition thinks they are research stations and archaeological sites. We have weapons that could crack planets. We have tactical computers designed for one job: winning wars." Helen rubbed her temples. "We swore we would never use them when we joined the coalition. We promised to be peaceful." "The coalition is about to die," Sam said. "Every peaceful species in the galaxy is about to become extinct. Our promises won't matter if there's nobody left to keep them to." On the coalition's capital world, Ambassador Martinez faced angry alien leaders. They wanted to know why the human ships had retreated instead of helping the diplomatic vessels. They accused humans of being cowards. Admiral Kethvar's crystal body glowed red with anger. "Your species claims to understand conflict, yet you ran when others needed help." Lisa took a deep breath. "Our ship had basic weapons. We would have died in seconds. At least this way, we could warn you what really happened. You should have died trying to save them, said a cloud being. That is what civilized species do. Dr. Alan Cooper was finally allowed to speak. He stood up in the observer section, holding a thick folder of research. May I present my findings about the swarm? The council reluctantly agreed. Alan had studied every historical record of the swarm's previous visits. What he found was terrifying. The swarm has appeared 5 times in galactic history, Alan said. Each time it consumed everything in their path. The only species that survived were those that fought back with extreme force. Diplomacy has never worked, not once. A 6-armed golden alien laughed. Your species is obsessed with violence. Of course you think fighting is the answer. I think survival is the answer, Alan replied. Every species that tried to negotiate with the swarm is extinct. The records are clear. The council dismissed Alan's research. They voted to send bigger diplomatic missions. They would build quantum empathy transmitters to share their emotions with the swarm. They would offer to sacrifice entire worlds to show their commitment to peace. Meanwhile, the swarm kept advancing. They reached the wisdom worlds, ancient planets where the galaxy's greatest thinkers lived. These beings had spent millions of years studying philosophy and art. They had achieved perfect harmony with the universe. The wisdom worlds chose to meet the swarm without any defenses. They believed their pure thoughts and peaceful intentions would touch whatever remained of the swarm's original souls. Captain Morrison's ship was ordered to observe from a safe distance. Jake and his crew watched the screens as 40 billion enlightened beings prepared to welcome their destroyers with love. This is insane, Nina Rodriguez whispered. They're not even raising shields. Pete Walsh shook his head. They think they can hug the monsters to death. The swarm arrived at the first wisdom world like a black tide. The enlightened beings stood in their crystal cities, broadcasting thoughts of peace and understanding. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no defenses of any kind. The slaughter took 6 hours. Jake watched beings who had achieved perfect wisdom being torn apart and processed into mechanical components. Their thoughts, their memories, their souls, everything was fed into the swarm's collective consciousness. Are you recording this? Jake asked his communications officer. Yes, sir. Every second. The other wisdom worlds fell just as quickly. Beings who had transcended physical existence were reduced to raw materials. Their perfect cities became piles of metal. Their profound thoughts became processing power for the machines. When it was over, Jake sent the recordings to every coalition. Leader. He included a simple message. They don't want to talk. They want to eat. And we just fed them the smartest beings in the galaxy. Back on Earth, President Carter made the hardest decision of her life. She called together the Joint Chiefs in the HFY, deepest secure facility on the planet. General Frank Taylor commanded the Army. Admiral Beth Clark led the Navy. Air Marshal Lucy Kim controlled the Air Force. We're going to reveal everything, Helen told them. Every ship, every weapon, every secret base. The galaxy is going to hate us, but at least some of them might survive. Admiral Clark pulled up holographic displays showing human military assets across the galaxy. The numbers were staggering. Hidden shipyards had been building warships for 2 centuries. Secret research facilities had developed weapons that the Coalition could not imagine. Once we show them what we really are, there's no going back, Beth warned. They'll never trust us again. Better to be alive and hated than dead and loved. General Taylor said. The announcement went out on every communication channel in the galaxy. Director Hayes appeared on screens in every Coalition world. His message was simple and shocking. This is Director Sam Hayes of Earth Defense Forces. For 200 years, we have hidden our true military strength from the Coalition. We did this to keep peace and maintain your trust. But peace is ending. The swarm cannot be negotiated with. They can only be destroyed. Humanity is prepared to fight." The numbers that followed left the galaxy speechless. 10,000 warships, 1,000,000 soldiers, weapons that could shatter moons, all hidden under the cover of peaceful exploration and cultural preservation. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Every coalition species accused humanity of lying and betrayal. They had welcomed humans as brothers in peace, only to discover they had been living with warriors the entire time. Ambassador Martinez faced a tribunal of angry alien leaders. They wanted to expel humanity from the coalition immediately. They called humans primitive warmongers who could not be trusted. "You deceived us," Admiral Kethver said, his crystal body pulsing with fury. "We opened our hearts to you, and you are planning for war." Lisa stood calmly before the tribunal. "We were planning to protect you from something you refused to see coming. Every species the swarm has ever encountered tried diplomacy first. They're all extinct now. You should have told us the truth," a cloud being accused. "You would have expelled us immediately," Lisa replied. "You're trying to expel us now, even when you need our help to survive." Dr. Cooper presented his complete research to the tribunal. He showed them records of 12 different galactic civilizations that had tried to negotiate with the swarm. All had failed. All had died. "The evidence is clear," Olin said. "The swarm doesn't recognize other species as intelligent life. To them, we're just raw materials that happen to be organized in interesting ways. You can't negotiate with the force of nature." Some coalition leaders began to listen. The cloud beings, who had originally supported pure diplomacy, started asking about human military capabilities. A few crystal entities wondered if their peaceful philosophy needed adjustment, but it was too late for gradual change. The swarm had consumed the wisdom worlds and gained access to millions of years of accumulated knowledge. They were smarter now, more dangerous than ever, before Doc Captain Morrison received new orders from Earth. The Independence was being recalled for immediate retrofit. When it returned to service, it would no longer be a peaceful escort vessel. It would be a weapon of war. As Jake's ship headed toward the nearest human military base, he looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness, the swarm was growing stronger with each world they consumed. The galaxy's greatest minds were now part of the mechanical collective. "They're coming for the core worlds next," Nina said quietly. Jake nodded. "Then we'd better be ready for them." The bunker beneath Earth's surface had not been used in over a century. President Helen Carter walked through corridors lined with weapons that were supposed to never see daylight. General Frank Taylor and Admiral Beth Clark followed her there, faces grim. "Show me everything," Helen said. They entered a room filled with holographic displays. Each screen showed a different human military installation hidden across the galaxy. What the Coalition thought were peaceful research stations were actually weapons factories. Archaeological sites were really military bases. Deep space telescopes were targeting systems for planet-killing weapons. Admiral Clark activated the main display. Project Cerberus has been building warships for 200 years. We have 10,000 vessels of various sizes. Project Ragnarok developed weapons that can crack continents. Project Hellfire created tactical computers that can coordinate battles across multiple star systems. Helen stared at the numbers. "How did we hide all this?" "Carefully," General Taylor said. "Every human ship captain knows the truth. Every human colony has hidden weapons. Every human diplomat is also a military intelligence officer. We've been preparing for this day since we joined the Coalition. The decision was made. Earth would reveal its true nature to the galaxy. They would be branded as liars and warmongers, But the alternative was watching every peaceful species die while maintaining their reputation. Director Sam Hayes appeared on communication screens across the galaxy. His broadcast reached every coalition world, every space station, every ship. What he said changed everything. Citizens of the galaxy, this is Director Hayes of Earth Defense Forces. For 2 centuries, we have hidden our military strength to maintain peace. That time is over. The devourer swarm cannot be reasoned with. They can only be stopped by superior firepower. Humanity is ready to provide that firepower. The numbers that followed shocked the galaxy. 10,000 human warships were already in position around coalition worlds. Weapons platforms disguised as mining stations were powering up. Soldiers who had pretended to be scientists were revealing their true purpose. On the coalition flagship, Ambassador Lisa Martinez faced the angriest tribunal in galactic history. Representatives from dozens of species accused her of the worst betrayal in coalition history. Admiral Kethvar's crystal body burned with red light. You have been lying to us for 200 years. You promised to embrace peace, but you were. Preparing for war, Lisa stood calmly before the angry aliens. We embraced peace because it was better than war. But we never forgot that peace only exists when good people are strong enough to defend it. A cloud being pulsed with dark energy. You have violated every treaty, broken every promise. How can we trust you now? Because we're the only ones who can save you, Lisa replied. Every other species in this room would rather die peacefully than live through violence. We're the only ones willing to fight. Dr. Alan Cooper was called to present his complete research. He had studied not just the swarm's previous attacks, but also the responses of their victims. The pattern was always the same. Every galactic civilization has tried diplomacy first, Alan explained. The Velthani Empire spent 50 years trying to communicate with the swarm. They all died. The Korth Collective offered to share their most advanced technology. They were consumed in days. The Mind Weavers tried to merge consciousness with the swarm. They became part of the collective and were used to hunt down their own people. He showed holographic records of 12 different species. All had been peaceful. All had tried negotiation. All were extinct. Only 3 species have ever survived a swarm attack, Alan continued. The Wraith Lords, the Iron Khans, and the Destroyer. Caste. All 3 were warrior races who fought back immediately with overwhelming force. They didn't try to understand the swarm. They didn't attempt communication. They simply killed every mechanical unit they could find. Some coalition leaders began to understand. The cloud beings, who had lived in peace for millions of years, started asking questions about human military doctrine. Even a few crystal entities wondered if their philosophy needed to change. Captain Jake Morrison received orders to report to the hidden military base at Titan Station. When he arrived, he barely recognized his ship. The Independence had been stripped down and rebuilt. Where once it had comfortable quarters for diplomats, it now had weapons arrays. Where it had communication, equipment for peaceful contact, and now had targeting systems for war. Nina Rodriguez stared at her new weapons console. I've never seen anything like this. These plasma cannons can punch through a battleship's hull. Pete Walsh examined the new engines. We can outrun anything in the Coalition fleet. And if we can't outrun it, we can outfight it. Jake looked at his orders. The Independence was no longer an escort vessel. It was a destroyer, capable of taking on ships 10 times its size. More importantly, it was part of a fleet that was already moving toward the core worlds. The swarm had not been idle. They had consumed the wisdom worlds and gained access to millions of years of accumulated knowledge. They were smarter now, more dangerous. Their mechanical ships were adapting faster than ever before, but they had never faced humans before. First engagement happened at Kepler Station, a coalition listening post on the edge of explored space. The swarm sent a small force to test the defenses, expecting to find the same peaceful response they had encountered everywhere else. Instead, they found the human destroyer Vengeance waiting for them. Captain Sarah Mitchell had volunteered for the mission. Her ship was equipped with the latest human weapons and crewed by volunteers who understood they might not survive. But they also understood that someone had to make the first stand. The swarm ships approached, Kepler station broadcasting their usual consumption signals. They expected the station to try diplomatic contact or simply surrender. Instead, they were met with concentrated plasma fire from the Vengeance. The battle lasted 12 minutes. The swarm ships were destroyed completely, their wreckage scattered across space. Not a single human life was lost. Captain Mitchell sent her report to Earth Defense Command. Swarm units show tactical adaptation, but no strategic innovation. They're used to fighting prey, not predators. Recommend immediate expansion of aggressive response protocols. The message was clear. For the first time in 1,000 years, the swarm had encountered a species that fought back immediately, without hesitation, without mercy. They didn't know how to respond. President Carter addressed the human colonies scattered across the galaxy. We are no longer hiding. Every human ship, every human base, every human colony is now part of the war effort. We will protect the innocent, but we will not pretend to be something we are not. The transformation was swift and stunning. Human cargo ships revealed hidden weapons. Human mining stations activated defense systems. Human colonies that had seemed peaceful suddenly bristled with military hardware. The coalition watched in amazement and horror as humanity's true nature was revealed. These were not the peaceful explorers they had welcomed. These were warriors who had been patiently waiting for a war worth fighting. Admiral Beth Clark took command of the first human fleet from her flagship Defiance. The ship was a marvel of human military engineering designed for one purpose, destroying enemies of the coalition. As she looked out at her fleet of 1,000 warships, she knew they were facing the greatest threat in galactic history. But they were also the greatest weapon the galaxy had ever seen. The swarm was approaching the core worlds now, expecting to find the same peaceful response they had encountered everywhere else. Instead, they would find 10,000 human warships waiting for them, crewed by the descendants of a species that had never stopped preparing for war. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his rebuilt ship and watched the tactical displays. The swarm was 3 days away from the first core world. Humanity had 3 days to prove that peace was worth fighting for. All stations report ready for combat, Nina announced. Engines at full power, Pete confirmed. Jake nodded. Then let's show the galaxy what humans do when someone threatens our friends. The Independents turned toward the incoming darkness, followed by 9,999 other human warships. The galaxy's long peace was ending. Humanity's long war was about to begin. President Helen Carter stood in the war room that had been built in secret beneath the White House. For 200 years, this room had waited for the day when humanity would have to fight for the galaxy. That day had arrived. Admiral Beth Clark's image appeared on the main screen. She was aboard her flagship Defiance, somewhere near the core worlds. Behind her, the bridge bustled with activity as human officers prepared for the largest military operation in galactic history. Madam President, we have a problem, Beth said. The coalition species want to fight, but they don't know how. They've been peaceful for so long that they've forgotten what war means. Helen nodded. What do you need? Time and teachers. We need to turn philosophers into soldiers, diplomats into warriors. It's like trying to teach children to fight monsters. General Frank Taylor leaned forward. How long do we have? The swarm will reach the first core world in 6 days. After that, They'll move through the heart of Coalition space. If we can't stop them there, the galaxy dies. Helen made the decision it would define humanity's role in galactic history. Do whatever it takes. Turn every human ship into a training ground. Turn every human soldier into a teacher. The galaxy is going to learn to fight whether it wants to or not. Captain Jake Morrison found himself assigned to the strangest mission of his career. His destroyer Independence was now a mobile training platform. His job was to teach Coalition officers how to think like warriors. His first student was Commander Zelena of the Korth Collective. The Korth were advanced beings who existed partially as energy and partially as matter. They could manipulate space and time with their thoughts, but they had never used their powers for violence. I do not understand your human concept of tactics, Zelena said, her form shimmering between solid and transparent. Why do we not simply ask the swarm to stop? Jake tried to keep his voice patient. Because they don't see you as intelligent life. To them, you're just organized matter that can be processed into useful components. But surely they can be made to understand. Commander, Jake interrupted. Your people can bend space with your minds. Instead of using that power to build gardens, you need to use it to crush swarm ships. Instead of creating art, you need to create weapons. The lesson was repeated on hundreds of human ships across the galaxy. Species that had known only peace for millions of years had to learn the hard truths of war in a matter of days. Engineer Pete Walsh found himself teaching alien mechanics how to maintain weapon systems. Most Coalition engineers had never seen a plasma cannon, much less learned how to fix one. This is the targeting array, Pete explained to a group of 6 armed golden beings. If it breaks down in battle, your ship dies. If your ship dies, everyone on it dies. If everyone dies, the swarm gets stronger. One of the aliens raised 4 of his 6 hands. But surely there are non-violent solutions to mechanical problems? Pete stared at him. The non-violent solution is fixing the weapon before the shooting starts. The violent solution is what happens when you don't. Dr. Lisa Kane, the Independence's medical officer, taught alien doctors how to treat combat injuries. Most Coalition physicians had never seen wounds caused by weapons. Their people died of old age or accidents, not violence. Plasma burns go deep into the tissue, Lisa explained to a group of cloud beings who served as healers. You can't just heal the surface. The energy continues burning from the inside out. The cloud beings pulsed with distress. Why would anyone create weapons that cause such suffering? Because the alternative is extinction, Lisa replied. The swarm doesn't take prisoners. They don't show mercy. They process living beings into raw materials. A plasma burn hurts, but it heals. Being turned into machine parts doesn't. The hardest part wasn't teaching aliens how to use weapons. The hardest part was teaching them to think like enemies. Captain Morrison stood before a group of Coalition officers in the Independence's briefing room. They represented a dozen different species, all of them struggling to understand human military doctrine. The key to defeating the swarm is accepting that they are truly alien, Jake explained. They don't think like you. They don't value what you value. They see your peaceful intentions as weakness to be exploited. A crystal being raised. A glowing appendage. But how do we fight enemies we cannot understand? You don't need to understand them, Jake replied. You need to kill them before they kill you. Understanding is a luxury for after the war is over. The lessons were harsh but necessary. Coalition officers learned to target enemy weak points. Instead of trying to disable weapons humanely, they learned to press attacks instead of retreating to minimize casualties. They learned that in war, hesitation meant death. Director Sam Hayes coordinated the largest intelligence operation in human history. Every human ship, every human base, every human colony became part of a galaxy-wide network gathering information. About the swarm, the data was disturbing. The swarm was not just consuming worlds randomly. They were learning from each victory, adapting their tactics based on what they encountered. The mechanical collective was becoming smarter and more dangerous with every system they destroyed, but humans were learning too. Each engagement revealed new information about swarm psychology, if it could be called that. The machines were efficient, but not creative. They followed patterns, but couldn't innovate. They could adapt existing strategies, but couldn't invent new ones. Dr. Alan Cooper analyzed the data from his position at Coalition headquarters. He had become the galaxy's leading expert on swarm behavior, a field of study that hadn't existed a month ago. They're not just consuming resources, Alan reported to the Emergency Council. They're consuming information. Every species they assimilate adds to their collective knowledge. That's why they're so dangerous. They learn from every victory. Ambassador Lisa Martinez, now bearing the title of Supreme War Coordinator, asked the critical question: how do we fight an enemy that learns from every battle? We learn faster, Alan replied. We adapt quicker. We innovate while they imitate. We be more human than they can process. The first major test came at Haven System, where 50,000 Coalition refugees had gathered on a single world. The swarm sent a massive force to crush any organized resistance before it could spread. Admiral Clark commanded the defense from her flagship Defiance. Around her, a mixed fleet of human warships and hastily armed Coalition vessels prepared for battle. Many of the alien crews had been training for less than a week. Remember, Beth broadcast to all ships, the swarm expects you to run or surrender. Instead, you're going to fight. You're going to hurt them. You're going to show them that the galaxy has teeth. The swarm fleet was enormous, thousands of mechanical ships designed for consumption rather than combat. They had never faced serious resistance before. They approached Haven System, expecting easy victory. Instead, they found humans waiting for them. The battle was brutal and chaotic. Swarm ships, used to fighting fleeing targets, had to adapt to enemies that advanced while shooting. Coalition crews, trained in peace, had to learn to kill while under fire. Captain Morrison's Independence led a group of smaller ships against the swarm's left flank. Nina Rodriguez worked her weapons console like a pianist, sending plasma bolts into mechanical hulls. Pete Walsh kept the engines running while explosions rocked the ship around them. They're trying to surround us, Nina reported. Good, Jake replied. That means they're not learning fast enough. The human tactic was simple but effective. Instead of fighting defensively, they attacked aggressively. Instead of trying to preserve their ships, they used them as weapons. Instead of retreating when damaged, they rammed swarm vessels. It was a philosophy alien to both the peaceful Coalition and the efficient swarm. Humans fought with controlled fury, accepting losses to inflict greater damage on their enemies. Battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the swarm fleet was destroyed completely. The Coalition had lost 40% of their ships, but they had accomplished something no species had managed in 1,000 years. They had made the swarm retreat. Lieutenant Andy Stone, the Independence's tactical officer, watched the mechanical ships withdraw into dark space. They're not running away, he observed quietly. They're going back to learn from what we did to them. Jake nodded grimly. Then we'd better learn faster than they do. The Battle of Haven System sent shockwaves through both the Coalition and the swarm. For the first time, peaceful species had stood and fought. For the first time, the mechanical collective had been forced to retreat. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. The swarm would return with new tactics, new strategies, new adaptations based on what they had learned. Humanity had 6 months to prepare for the final battle. 6 months to turn a galaxy of philosophers into an army of warriors. 6 months to teach peace-loving species how to wage total war. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Peace was not the absence of conflict. Peace was what happened when good people were strong enough to fight evil ones. And humanity was about to teach the galaxy just how strong good people could be. The war room beneath Earth had become the nerve center of galactic resistance. President Helen Carter had not seen sunlight in 3 months. She lived surrounded by screens, showing battle preparations across the galaxy. Every human world was now a weapons factory. Every human ship was now a warship. Director Sam Hayes brought her the final numbers. 10 million soldiers, 15,000 warships, weapons platforms around every inhabited system. We've turned the entire galaxy into a fortress. Helen looked tired but determined. Will it be enough? It has to be, Sam replied, because this is everything we have. The swarm had used their 6 months of retreat wisely. Deep space sensors showed them massing in dark space between the galaxies. They had grown larger, more organized, more dangerous than ever before. They had learned from their defeat at Haven System and adapted accordingly. Ambassador Lisa Martinez, now the official Supreme War Coordinator, addressed the galaxy from the Coalition's emergency headquarters. Behind her stood representatives from every surviving species. Some were warriors now, trained by human instructors. Others remained non-combatants, but supported the war effort in their own ways. 6 months ago, we were a galaxy of peaceful species, facing extinction, Lisa said. Today, we are an alliance of peoples willing to fight for survival. The swarm thinks they know us because they defeated our diplomats. They have never faced our soldiers. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and barely recognized the Independence. It had been rebuilt again, this time as a command vessel for coordinating mixed human-alien squadrons. His crew now included officers from 6 different species, all trained in human military doctrine. Nina Rodriguez had trained 2 backup weapons officers, both crystal beings who could calculate firing solutions faster than any human computer. Pete Walsh worked with energy-based engineers who could repair systems by simply willing them to function properly. The swarm fleet is moving, Lieutenant Andy Stone reported. They'll be here in 72 hours. Jake nodded. The final battle would take place in the Sol system, around Earth itself. It was humanity's choice to make their homeworld the last line of defense. If they failed here, there would be nowhere left to run. Admiral Beth Clark commanded the largest fleet in galactic history from her flagship Defiance. Around Earth, 15,000 warships waited in carefully planned formations. Human vessels mixed with coalition ships, creating a defensive network that covered the entire solar system. Plan was simple. The swarm expected to fight the same enemies they had always fought. Peaceful species that would try diplomacy first, then retreat when violence began. Instead, they would face a galaxy that had learned to think like humans. Dr. Alan Cooper had spent months studying swarm behavior and developing the final strategy. He sat in the Defiance's tactical center, surrounded by computers analyzing every piece of data they had gathered about their enemy. They'll try to overwhelm us with numbers, Alan explained to the fleet commanders. They expect us to spread our forces thin, trying to protect everything. Instead, we're going to concentrate our firepower and punch through their center. This strategy violated every peaceful instinct the Coalition had developed over millions of years. Instead of defending, they would attack. Instead of preserving life, they would sacrifice ships to achieve victory. Instead of seeking harmony, they would create chaos in the enemy ranks. President Carter addressed Earth's population from the bunker that had become her home. Today, the galaxy discovers what humans are really capable of when everything we love is threatened. We didn't want this fight, but we won't run from it. The swarm arrived exactly when predicted. They came out of hyperspace like a black tide, millions of mechanical ships filling the space around Earth's solar system. They had grown enormously during their retreat, consuming entire dead systems to build their final fleet, but they had never seen anything like what waited for them. The battle began when Admiral Clark gave a single order: all ships attack. 15,000 warships surged forward as one. Human vessels led the charge, their crews trained for exactly this moment. Coalition ships followed, their alien crews fighting with desperate courage they had never known they possessed. Captain Morrison's Independence coordinated the left flank, where crystal beings used their natural abilities to bend space around. Swarm ships, crushing them like tin cans. Energy-based aliens channeled pure power through human weapon systems, creating devastating combinations of technology and natural ability. Nia Rodriguez and her crystal assistants worked in perfect harmony, sending plasma bolts through gaps in space that shouldn't have existed. Pete Walsh and his energy-based engineers kept the ship running at beyond maximum efficiency, drawing power from dimensions the swarm couldn't even detect. The swarm tried to adapt to human tactics, but humans had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. Every strategy the machines deployed had been anticipated. Every adaptation they made was met with a counter-adaptation. Director Hayes watched the battle from Earth's command center, coordinating intelligence from across the solar system. The swarm was learning quickly, but not quickly enough. They were fighting an enemy that had spent 2 centuries preparing for this exact situation. The turning point came when the swarm's central command ships reached Earth's inner system. These massive vessels controlled the entire mechanical collective, processing information from millions of smaller units and coordinating their attacks. Admiral Clark led the final assault personally. Her flagship Defiance, accompanied by 50 of humanity's most powerful warships, punched through the swarm's defensive screen and reached the command vessels. "This is for every peaceful species you destroyed," Beth broadcast as her ships opened fire. The command vessels died in spectacular explosions that lit up the solar system. As they were destroyed, the swarm's coordination began to break down. Millions of mechanical ships suddenly lost their central guidance, becoming individual units instead of a collective force. Jake Morrison watched the enemy fleet begin to fragment. They're not adapting anymore. They're just reacting. But the swarm had one final strategy. The remaining ships began combining into larger and larger vessels, sacrificing numbers for individual power. They were creating a single massive construct that could destroy entire fleets with one attack. President Carter made the hardest decision of the war: activate Project Omega. Project Omega was humanity's most closely guarded secret. It was a weapon so powerful that it had been considered too dangerous to ever use. It targeted enemies across quantum dimensions, attacking not just their physical form, but their very existence. The weapon fired from a hidden platform near Jupiter. Energy that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously reached out across space and touched the swarm's collective consciousness. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Across the galaxy, every swarm ship simply stopped. The mechanical collective that had terrorized civilizations for thousands of years died in a moment of perfect silence. The threat that had consumed half the galaxy was gone. The aftermath was as challenging as the war itself. 60% of humanity had died in the fighting. Dozens of coalition species were extinct. Entire star systems were uninhabitable, scarred by weapons that should never have been necessary. But the galaxy survived. 1 year later, Ambassador Lisa Martinez stood before the rebuilt Coalition Council. She was no longer just Earth's representative. She had been elected as the Coalition's first speaker, chosen by species that had learned the value of human protection. "We gather today to remember all who died defending peace," Lisa said. They came to destroy us because we were different. We survived because we learned to be united. The new coalition was different from the old one. Peace was still the goal, but it was peace backed by strength. Diplomacy was still preferred, but it was diplomacy supported by the threat of overwhelming force. Human ships patrolled the borders of coalition space, watching for threats the peaceful species might not recognize. Human advisors worked with alien governments, helping them maintain both their peaceful ideals and their defensive capabilities. Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, commanded the border patrol from his flagship Vigilance. His crew was still mixed human and alien, still united by the shared experience of the war. Contact on the long-range sensors, Nina Rodriguez reported. She was now his fleet tactical officer, coordinating dozens of ships instead of just one. Unknown vessels approaching from outside the galaxy, Pete Walsh confirmed. He had become the fleet's chief engineer, responsible for maintaining an entire battle group. Jake studied the sensor readings. The ships were clearly artificial, but they weren't broadcasting any hostile intent. They might be explorers, refugees, or traders from another galaxy. Open a channel, Jake ordered. Let's see if they want to talk. The response came back in mathematical language, equations and formulas that expressed peaceful intentions and a desire for contact. Looks like diplomats, Andy Stone observed. He was now Jake's executive officer, trained to think tactically. About every situation. Jake nodded. Good. We'll talk to them. But keep the weapons ready, just in case. It was the new way of the galaxy. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Trust, but verify. Seek peace, but be ready for war. President. Carter, now in her second term, record.